So some inflammation is good, in fact it's necessary, but sore muscles doesn't necessarily mean muscle growth. It's a really fine line to explore, but the key is we can only grow muscle so fast, and that's something everyone needs to understand. So I'm Simon, and I am admittedly obsessed with the science behind real, sustainable muscle growth and fat loss. And throughout this video, I'll explain why your nervous system is the secret gatekeeper behind your real gains, and how to work with your CNS to produce results rather than trying to constantly battle against it. So today I'll walk you through the not so obvious limitations of muscle growth, the reasons for these limitations, and how inflammation plays a role, or at least influences, your progress, and the exact strategies to optimize recovery so that you can work smarter, not harder, as the saying goes. And so by the end of this talk, you'll be able to understand if no pain, no gain is sound advice or a bit of a myth to just be aware of, and how to train hard, but not so hard that you burn out. And the number one mistake that people make when it comes to recovery, and more importantly, how to fix it. So this particular episode is all about giving you control so that you can start building muscle and burning fat and actually enjoy the process. So welcome to the channel. This is the Deep South Experiment, and we focus on fat loss, muscle building, and the mindset that connects it all together. Let's dive in. So a great starting point is the question of, is there a ceiling to how much muscle growth you can experience within a short time frame? So muscles have a very finite ability to grow, even given appropriate stimulus within a given time frame. Think of your body as a construction site. So you have so many bricks that you have to work with. You have so many workers that build the house, and no matter how hard everyone works, there's only a certain amount of house that can be built within that given time frame. Give it a day, a week, month, whatever it might be. Your body is no different. Here you have a body and you want to add muscle to it, and you only have so much protein that you can actually utilize and absorb and put to good use, and only so many hormones that can work on that protein, break it down and put yourself in a position to be able to then build that muscle, protein synthesis as it's called. So it's not too dissimilar to how you can only build so much house, you can only build so much muscle. And the process of protein synthesis itself spikes after a really good workout if the intensity and the volume and so on have been right. But then that protein synthesis returns back to a baseline value after a short period of time. It doesn't remain sky high indefinitely like we'd like it to. But these are the variables and the challenges that we have to work against when we're trying to build as much muscle as we can. Just think of a bathtub. Once it's full with water, you can't put more water into it. It'll overflow, it'll go to waste, and so on. Same with the muscles. You can build so much, but then working out a bit more and eating a bit more on top of that amount of muscle that you've built will not build more muscle. The body will find ways to be able to utilize the resources and so on. And if it all gets too much, you'll shut down. You'll become exhausted. You'll go into fatigue and overtraining, etc. So there's a certain amount that is useful, but beyond that, bit of a waste. It's a hypertrophy, which is the making muscles big part of all of this, is a slow and regulated process. The body keeps tabs on what it's doing. Look at myostatin, that's its role of making sure you aren't building too much muscle too fast. But for beginners, it's a little bit different. If you've never touched a weight before, you'll find an exceptional growth that you go through. But if you're advanced or intermediate even, then that process will be much slower. If someone or some company or some trainer says, I can put 10 pounds of muscle on you this month, come with me, pay up of course, then they're lying to you. Even when muscles hold water for various reasons, it won't be a 10-pound addition. It just doesn't work that way. And don't forget, the whole part of this muscle building journey, a huge part of it is the recovery process. Don't ever forget that. It's something that really has to be focused on as much as what you do in the gym. You see, your body isn't just about building muscle. It's about maintaining your immune system. It's about making the hormones that you need go to the right places to fuel organs, to make sure your brain stays alive, to make sure the energy balance is maintained. And if some of those are overwhelmed or sacrificed, then your body will just shut down. Simple as that. Because survival is prioritized over biceps. I like that phrase actually. So more volume beyond a certain amount doesn't equal more muscle growth, it just equals wasted effort and fatigue. Your muscles can only handle so much growth at a given time. What happens if you ignore that? And what happens if you just keep pushing yourself harder and harder? And later on I'll just explain what happens in these situations and how it can all backfire terribly on you. But first, let's just see how these limitations apply to strength. So we've just talked about the limitations of muscle growth, but let's pay a bit of attention now to any limitations to do with strength, which is more neurological rather than size of a muscle. The ceiling applies to both strength and hypertrophy, but it's just in different ways. Muscle size is more like adding workers to a job, adding more muscle fibers to the muscle itself, increasing its capacity to do something. Muscle strength is a little different. It's like learning a skill. Your nervous system is figuring out ways to be better, to be more efficient, to be more functional at doing something and doing it better than what it did before. So both strength and hypertrophy have limits, but they're not the same limits. So hypertrophy is about building your muscles, getting your raw materials, your proteins, your amino acids, and over time it builds into something bigger and probably stronger. But muscle strength in itself, it's like rewiring your brain. It's doing an exercise and figuring out what just happened. And then as a result of that, your brain will get better at doing it next time. And you're likely to see short-term strength gains, which is music to a lot of people's ears. And mine too. Back in the day when I was starting, I saw a lot of strength gains very fast. The amount of weight I was about to lift went up substantially, and my confidence in how it was feeling, how my muscles had adapted pretty fast to be able to be strong and sturdy and feel good about lifting. And then sure enough, I lifted more and more in a more confident way, larger range of motion, etc. It was great. That happens pretty fast. But then the muscle building side of things happens a lot slower. It's progressive overload over time. And that doesn't happen within days or in weeks. It happens over a longer period of time at snail's pace, unfortunately. Strength gains rely heavily on your nervous system, your central nervous system, CNS. But what happens if the CNS just refuses to play ball or refuses to cooperate? There you go, if you're not into ball sports. Well, later on, I'm going to just go through how to acknowledge or realize that there's a connection missing. And that connection is between your muscles and your brain. And it's an important connection. And I'll tell you how to deal with that, or the best way that I've found to deal with that. So, you know, I've always thought that muscle building is a bit like a chef in the kitchen. And bear with me, I'll explain. I like to think of the chef as the recovery of the muscle. If you overwhelm the chef, you won't get more meals out. You'll just get a chef who is a little bit disheveled, overwhelmed, frustrated, a little bit annoyed, not working as effectively as he or she can. You might find that the chef gets burnt out fairly fast. So recovery is like a bottleneck for muscle building, not the workout itself. And then the oven is like muscle protein synthesis. The oven has a limited capacity for the amount of food that can go in there at one time, and it takes time to cook. You can't blast the food with an immense amount of heat and then expect it to be cooked nicely and the result to be as you envisioned. And you can't microwave the food faster either. If you especially want the end result to be nice, a microwave won't do it. I know that I microwave pies every now and again, and they're saggy, and put them in the oven and they're right after a few minutes. Take that time to let them cook. Don't try and take a shortcut, because that chicken, your muscles, need about 30 minutes to cook, right? So let them cook for 30 minutes. Don't try and overwhelm that oven. Don't try and blast them with heat. Don't try and do anything you shouldn't do. Just let them cook. Same with muscle building. You produce the stimulus, etc., then let the body be the oven. Let it produce the muscle for you over time. Don't try and rush things. But here's an issue for you. What happens if your oven is broken? And on that point, just a moment, I'll share with you one of the biggest misconceptions I find, and is that how muscle breakdown and muscle synthesis happens simultaneously. Very few people talk about that. Don't know why. So we've been talking about muscle ceilings, how to let muscles grow at their own pace, all of that juicy stuff. And one question is, does the muscle ceiling that you have for growth get affected by things such as genetics or ethnicity and so on? Well, the fact is that your muscles have a limited amount of ribosomes. They're like the factory or the engine inside of your muscles. And the more of these factories that you have, the ribosomes, inside of a muscle, the faster it can grow. But these ribosomes aren't added just overnight. It is a long process of adaptation over time. And you've also got, outside of genetics and outside of ethnicity, you've got the environmental factors and what you've been doing in your life so far and how you've adapted to your daily activities. And energy utilization is a huge part of that. So if you've got a large amount of energy utilization coming in and you want more muscle, the body kind of thinks, well, hang on, and this is where myostatin comes in. The body says, well, hang on a second, it's going to cost me a lot of money to a lot of energy to maintain this extra muscle that you seem to be building. Where is that energy going to come from? Because you've got all these demands, all these extra activities and stuff that you've been doing every day so far. I can't cope with that. But if then over time you reassure the body and you create the stimulus for change, so therefore you're building muscle and you're intaking an appropriate amount of energy given what you're doing every day and now the muscle you're trying to build, then the body, regardless of genetics, ethnicity, etc., will do what you want it to do if it doesn't feel threatened. And then there's the classic, again, outside of genetics and ethnicity, is inflammation. I mentioned it right in the opening of the video here. Is that inflammation is something that you get as a result of working out really fast. You might call it DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. You work out hard, especially if you haven't done for a while, or if it's a different exercise variation, or it is just something you haven't experienced before, you'll get soreness. And that there is inflammation. Now the body has to take care of inflammation before it can do anything else, or mostly before it can do anything else. So if you're producing a lot of inflammation, then it's got steps to do before it starts building effectively. If you don't have a lot of inflammation, it can get to work straight away. So those are the kinds of things that can influence a ceiling of growth depending on your lifestyle factors and how you're working out. And it's not to say that individual differences don't exist. You've got genetics in terms of low responders and high responders to the exercises that you do. You get two people in a room doing the same thing under as many circumstances as you can control to be the same, and you'll likely get a different output or different result. That is because of these individual differences and the genetics involved. And of course the training history. If someone is new, but someone's been at it a while, again, two very different results. The newbie will fly away, and the more advanced person will be there going, bugger me, how did you do that so fast? You've only been doing it a week, look at you. And then the advanced person just gets all upset and says, it must be me, I must alter something. Nope, it's just an individual difference. Then you've got age, you've got sex, you've got recovery, not to mention nutrition. That's probably right on the top of the list there. And then you do, of course, have ethnic differences. Different ethnic populations have different muscle fiber types or volumes or the ability to use certain muscle fiber types than others. Some are naturally lean, others are naturally bigger. It all depends upon a number of factors, but the bottom line is that no matter what genetic differences you have, from what part of the world that you are, what ancestry that you have, the here and now, the time, the effort, the intensity, the recovery, the nutrition, the sleep, all of it is 10 times more important than what you just happen to be blessed with, or, whatever your makeup is. So back to what I was saying a moment ago about muscle breakdown and muscle synthesis at the same time as some of those misconceptions. And the question is really do they both happen simultaneously at the same time? And the answer is yes, they most certainly do. Just think about the construction of a highway or the replacement of a road. It isn't all torn down and then everyone goes, yep, it's not here anymore. None of it. It's all gone. And then they start building it again from scratch. It's always a process of some of it is being broken down and replaced and thrown away, and other parts of the road are being worked on, whether it's preparation or building or whatever. I'm no construction expert, believe me. I can't even paint a house, believe it or not. Well, I can, but it's all a bit of an effort really. But that highway is being broken down and being built just like your muscles. Whenever you're working out and then recovering, that whole process involves simultaneous breakdown and simultaneous protein synthesis or building of muscles. And you know when protein synthesis occurs the most is when the synthesis outweighs the breakdown. If it's the other way around, you lose muscle. If synthesis is greater than breakdown, you build muscle. Happy days. Now understand that this is a whole fragile process and it's easy to tip over into more breakdown than there is of building. But there's a very simple hack to that. Not that phrase hack. It sounds dodgy as and like, well, you shouldn't know about it. But it's just a way of actually getting around the problem. But we'll call it hack just because it sounds better, I think. So a hack to that muscle breakdown process is called the repeated Bout effect. Very catchy name, rolls off the tongue. But I'll go through that a little later on. Because first, we've got to address more of that inflammation that I touched on just a moment ago. Now, inflammation is important, it is necessary, just how much of it is the problem. So inflammation triggers the process of recovery. Simple as that. But, well, look at it as a fire alarm. The fire alarm goes off, it attracts everyone's attention, the fire brigade comes rushing in and everyone does what they're meant to do, go to the evacuation place, and this and that happens and everything is fine. But if that fire alarm is continuous, if it's broken, and it's too loud, which is what I've experienced in most cases of fire alarms, piercing noise, but anyway, then everyone gets a little bit tired, overwhelmed, and may eventually start ignoring that alarm. It's like, oh, that alarm won't shut up, rather than like, right, it's going off, what do we do? Two entirely different mentalities. So in terms of muscle building, you've got the inflammation, and whether you've got enough of it or too much is the difference between no one arriving to fix the problem of inflammation, or just enough to get all the right tools and processes to happen as they should to then continue with muscle building. So we don't want too much overwhelmness. We want just enough inflammation to get the job done and the process of muscle protein synthesis to occur nicely. And inflammation, of course, produces soreness in the muscles. Too much of it for too long, over too much time, it'll equal burnout. You'll probably break muscle down. And it shouldn't really last any more than 72 hours. Some leg workouts can last a while, especially if it's something you're doing after some time off or a new workout. So allow yourself that. But in most parts of the body, yeah, don't go over 72 hours. If you do, don't go quite so intense, because it goes back to before, that bath water, eh? If you put too much water in the bath, it just overflows and wastes. It doesn't build more muscle. Same applies to that 72-hour DOMS problem. And so how do you avoid this excessive inflammation? Well, make sure you sleep, recover, and eat. That will allow you to be able to revert back to the way you were before and get rid of that inflammation and that DOMS and get your body ready to go for next time. Repeated bout effect. And it's also quite smart not to train to 100% or train to failure every single time you do an exercise. There are some great opportunities to pick and choose what you do, and it can be quite fun, very rewarding. Very rewarding. I'll just put that down as a complicated word. And satisfying, there you go, at the end. But don't do it every time. And aside from the intensity, manage your volume. If you're going to be in the gym for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just doing excessive amounts of volume, same sort of thing will occur. They might not be intense to failure every time, but there's so much of it and your body's got to deal with it. There's only so much you can do. So think about the volume. And then taking it up a level, chronic inflammation is a silent killer of gains. But the question is, how do you know when that's out of control? Especially if you don't have anything to measure it by or prior experience to draw on. So later on, I'll tell you some red flags just to be mindful of to help keep that under control. So we've been talking about inflammation for a little while, and that leads nicely into the section of DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. So, as a surprise for a few people, perhaps DOMS is not necessary for muscle growth. DOMS is kind of like a hangover. You might have been to a party and you've got a hangover, but it doesn't mean you've had fun. The same way with muscle growth. It just might mean that you overdid it in the gym. That's all. Muscle growth happens when you train smart, not necessarily hard. If you have muscle soreness as a result of a good workout where you have trained smart, then that's just the way it is. It could be a novelty effect, or a break from training, you're returning. It happens. Just don't go in search of it, or don't be disappointed the next morning. If you lift your arms up and you go, no, can't feel anything, doesn't mean you're not growing. It just means you haven't experienced the soreness and the inflammation. Because after all, DOMS is something the body has to deal with, especially if it's excessive. It prolongs recovery rather than promoting growth. So what I mean by that is, if you've got DOMS and excessive muscle soreness and inflammation, the body has to process all of that, get the muscle to the point where growth can now occur. Or it starts to try to do that in amongst all the inflammation, but it's not quite as effective. But once the conditions or the environment within the muscle is optimal or close to it, then that growth process can start occurring more effectively, more rapidly, and you're there. Now, if you worked out and you didn't have DOMS, that muscle growth process can happen right away. But in the excessive DOMS environment, work has to be done beforehand to restore the muscle to then allow optimal muscle growth to occur. So mild DOMS, great. Yes, it shows you what you've done. It gives you a bit of motivation perhaps, and it's not really hampering anything that's happening. So mild muscle soreness, great sign that you've had a good workout. And this also begs the question of, why does muscle soreness disappear faster for some people, or for the same person, it disappears faster this time than it did last time? And some people just have more efficient systems. Some people can deal with DOMS a lot better than others, whereas some people adapt faster than others. So there's a lot of variation here in terms of how fast you can adapt to DOMS. But generally, if you've done a hard, let's say, leg workout and your legs are sore, and then you take a break and weeks down the line, then you do it again, DOMS is likely to occur, but it's likely to occur to less of an extent because your body has been here before, it's adapted before, and that clever little brain of ours knows exactly what to do. And it's just the level to which, or the extent to which you overwhelm it by. So this creates a vicious cycle, but there is a way to use DOMS to strategically ensure growth. And I'll share that protocol with you toward the end of the video. Right, so we've covered inflammation and DOMS, kind of the same thing there. Now the next step on from that is the repeated bout effect. So a bit of background is when you have done something for the first time, perhaps a good leg, chest, back, whatever workout, often involving a large muscle group, you'll get a lot of pain from doing that. A lot of DOMS, muscle soreness is probably more appropriate than saying muscle pain. And your body is kind of freaking out in that process, getting inflamed and all of those sort of effects of something that it hasn't felt before or felt in a long time. It's like a caveman seeing fire. They get very excited and don't know what to do. But the body, the second time around, there is no freaking out. There is no caveman getting excited about fire. Instead, he's waiting with a fire extinguisher. Because they had fire extinguishers years ago, back in the caveman days, waiting to put the fire out because it knew what was coming. The same way the body knows what's coming once it lifts that heavy weight again, or lifts with that certain grip again, or does that certain exercise again. And the body will also adapt from its first exercise. It wants to become stronger. It wants to be able to do that again as soon as it can, because it's a threat to its survival if it can't. So therefore, new sarcomeres, new connective tissue, or strengthened connective tissue. That's what the body does in order to prepare itself for the next time. So the next time you do that same workout again, if you did the same volume, same intensity, same reps, etc., those variables remain constant, then you won't get DOMS again. That level of inflammation won't be that way again because the body will have adapted. And that is the repeated bout effect. And also this repeated bout effect is proof that muscle growth can occur in the presence of inflammation, because you're very inflamed after the first time. All those DOMS that might be there for 72 hours plus, it's hard going on your body. But yet the next time you do it, you can do it without DOMS because the body has adapted. So you can adapt in the presence of inflammation to that extent. So then just imagine how much adaptation can occur without that inflammation going forward. It's like supercharging your body, really. If you can adapt from week 1 to week 2 with that inflammation present and be able to perform that much better without getting that DOMS. Just imagine what your body is going through when you do give it the appropriate rest and nutrition from one week to the next. It's quite spectacular, really. The body is a remarkable machine. But there is a catch to all of that. Imagine if you hammer that same workout week after week after week, trying to force that repeated bout effect because you know that you can do it and you know that you want that intensity, perhaps the volume, and you just push as hard as you possibly can under that knowledge. And what will happen is you'll fry your system, your systematic, your nervous system, all of it will be under so much pressure. There'll be so much demand on the resources that you have. What will happen? Do you think that you'll get the repeated bout effect time and time and time again and everything will be hunky-dory? Well, there is a bit of a hack to get that repeated bout effect, and I'll share that with you a little later on. It's to do with your CNS and that nervous switch that you can put into play. So let's just take a step back and go back to the repeated bout effect and how muscle adaptation can occur in the presence of DOMS, or in the presence of inflammation. There we go, got it out in the end. Now you might say, repeated bout effect means I can still adapt. Great, that's what I'm going to do. push so hard, get so far, and I'll just live or exist in that repeated bout effect scenario, or that inflammation scenario. But if you think about building a house in a hurricane or a cyclone, then you're not going to get very far. As you do things, things will fall down and it'll just be more of an effort. And perhaps you can build a house in a hurricane. I don't know. People would choose not to. They'd say, let's wait for better weather. But you could probably still do it. Same with muscle. You can build muscle in those bad environments, or environments that aren't as ideal as others. But it will just take a lot of work, a bit more time for the body to adapt to it. So a mild inflamed environment is the best one to shoot for. And don't forget myostatin. Myostatin comes into good environments and suppresses cell growth, or allows the growth to occur. When you're heavily inflamed, that is like myostatin being present, is that you can't really do as much as you want to do. You have to wait until it's inhibited. You have to wait until that inflammation is gone for you to be in full effect and at your full potential. But the real danger is that inflammation can not only stunt growth, but it can reverse it as well. And I'll cover a few ways to measure your inflammation shortly. So we'll move on from inflammation now to the limitations of your nervous system. So the CNS covers the recruitment of muscles, how fast they're firing off, and it too has an output that is limited, has limited resources. So your brain, which is the starting point of the CNS, is like the CEO of all of your tissues, the managing director of your muscles in your body. And when it gets tired, you can't really do much of anything at all. It's like when you build that house that I was talking about a while ago. If your builders are tired, they're not going to build much. You can feed them as much caffeine as you want to, but they're still probably going to be a little bit lacking in the performance department. The same with the body. You can give it as much food and building blocks as you want, but if that CNS is not up to par and your workouts are not stimulating the change that you need, then nothing much is going to happen at all. And the interesting thing here is that the CNS is very good at protecting itself. And this is why it gets worn out and fried. It's because your muscles give it feedback as well. And it says, hang on, far too much tension here. I'm done. I'm exercised far too much. I'm all out of resources. Can you please stop? And the CNS will be like, hang on, right, I've got all these signals back, this feedback from the muscles saying that things aren't looking that great. They were, but now they're not, because you've worked out hard. Therefore, I'm going to stop allowing the muscles to fire as much or as fast or in unison as they do, and I'm going to bring the performance down. And I tell you, when that happens, nothing you can do about it. And there are other systematic barriers to growth as well. The hormones. Your body is in touch with the hormones that it secretes and supplies to help this muscle building system. Cortisol is one. It's a stress hormone. When things get a bit too tough, a lot of cortisol comes along, and that tends to break things down rather than encouraging to build them up. And then there's low testosterone. That'll simply mean we're looking at less muscle protein synthesis, less building of muscle. And then there's the recovery capacity. You have full control over how much rest you're giving, how much nutrition that you're eating, how much sleep that you're getting. These things are also very important to support everything else if you want to maximize your muscle building capacity. So there you have a number of systematic barriers, but let's just touch on the CNS another time. Your CNS misperforming is like your Wi-Fi cutting out when you're watching a movie. You get glitches, things don't occur properly, and you know that something is wrong. Your muscles feel fine, they might be pumped up, and you might be feeling strong and that you're having a good workout. But the brain isn't functioning the way that it's supposed to, and the signals that are coming through to make your muscles fire aren't necessarily as they need to be, and you think, hang on, something's wrong. It feels really heavy, and I'm exhausted, I'm out of breath, whatever it might be. And the CNS controls neurotransmitters, and these are the transmitters that make everything happen. If it stops producing those, it reduces the secretion of them, or your muscles just don't have many left, then it won't be able to perform as well as you want it to. And the motor cortex in your brain, the down-regulation of that, just means things don't happen as efficiently anymore. And that's a great sign that you're just getting tired. And that's enough for today. And so what does all that look like? Well, it looks like being sluggish. It looks like your lifts are going downhill. Your motivation's a bit like, I'm here in the gym, but I'm not really doing much. And it's that kind of feeling. Before, we looked at how to use DOMs to strategically help you progress. Now, the CNS is like a good old coach who says, you're done for the day, don't do any more, because we don't want you to go tearing a muscle or a ligament or whatever, probably a tendon. That coach knows what your limits are, maybe better than you, and it wants to protect you. So they call it a day, go and hit the showers, whatever. Now, respecting that process, that knowing that your CNS has limitations and that you can't just keep going and going and going, you're respecting those limitations, respecting DOMs when it comes, respecting the inflammation that you feel when it's with you, respecting that and stopping is the hack that you have to getting better over time. If you push through it, you're going to limit your ability to progress. If you stop when it's here and say, now my job is to rest and recover, not to push myself through another barrier and work even harder, that process, that way of thinking is going to help you to get the most muscle that you can get. And finally, just the last few gaps there to cover off, and this relates to fat loss as well, because avoiding that systematic burnout, so all of your internal things, your CNS being fried or working too hard, it comes down to calories, that you've got to give the body the food that it needs. And in doing so, paying attention to the caloric deficit, it's all a very important part of the equation. Because cutting calories is like running a business on a budget. You start firing non-essential people and then they're not there to do the job for you. Whereas what you want to do is, if you are walking that fine line between enough calories and a calorie deficit, then you need to consume enough calories in order to have those people in the business, to have those building blocks, to have the energy reserve within the body, to be able to go on to build that muscle, to be able to go on and give the building blocks required to help all the systemic functions of the body be as they need to be and have the energy available for you to do what you need to do, i.e. build muscle. So in a calorie deficit to lose body fat, your CNS tends to fatigue faster. Cortisol will rise. Testosterone will dip. These are the things that you don't want to happen. So strategies to stop that from happening? Well, look at your volume. Don't do so much of it that you're putting so much stress on your system. Be smart with the way that you're working out. Prioritize recovery. The nutrition, the sleep, the rest. That's all just as important as what you do in the gym. And my favorite one, well, not a favorite one, but it's always controversial and stuff like that. It's just avoid cardio. Don't put another layer of stress onto your body. Just say, yep, it's there. But if you're concentrating on muscle building, then leave the cardio alone. You don't need that stress. Unless you love it, of course. And it's the reason why you go to the gym, then go. Do what you enjoy doing, because that will be how you stick around and you do this for a long period of time and you build it into a habit of yours. But if you don't like it, then just don't bother doing it. So, stimulate, don't annihilate. That's got to be the phrase of the day. Hey, thanks for joining me. Subscribe if you wouldn't mind, helps the channel grow. I'll catch you next time.